First of all, grapes of any crop that we grow probably is pruned more extensively and more aggressively than anything else you can think of. If you know how to do it properly, grape will become very, very productive. If you don't do enough, it simply grows into a jungle and the plant is never as productive. All you need to do to prune them would just be a pair of small hand pruners. If you haven't been aggressive in the last several years, you might need a pair of hand loppers. The principle of pruning grapes is to leave 4 branches coming off of that main trunk. Usually 2 on the top, one going one direction and one going the other, and then 2 down lower down, one going one direction, one going the other. Grapes are normally planted about 12 feet apart, and so we would leave those, each branch about 6 feet long, and then the plant from the next trunk would be coming over, and so they would be just about touching. Everything else that grew the previous year needs to come off. In selecting those 4 branches that we're going to leave, we need to get a branch that is about as big around as your finger, and one that's alive, and you can tell that by simply trying to bend it, and if it's flexible and bendable, it's alive. We need to do the pruning sometime in the early spring, just before the buds start to swell. Actually, we're a little bit late to this year because the buds have actually started to grow. We'd like to do that when there's just a small amount of growth developing, but also late enough so that you can determine if there's any dead growth. You want to be sure to pull it out. And then all we need to do is count out about 6 feet from that, if we're pretending that this is attached to the trunk. So we'll go out about 6 feet from that and prune it off. Snap it off like that, and then everything else in between comes off as well. So any little side branches that may have formed, they come off as well. So all we're going to have is one cane coming off that main trunk, about 6 feet long, and nothing else on it. A grape plant will produce a tremendous amount of growth in a single season. This is an example of one cane that grew last year, and as you can see, it's probably at least 20 to 25 feet long, and the plant may have 15 or 20 or 30 of these that develop in a single season. And it's a very, very impressive amount of wood that comes off that needs to be removed from the plant. The disadvantage of not pruning enough is that the plants produce all of this foliage, which becomes shade that limits the plant's ability to set fruit buds for the following year. So you have all of this foliage growth, and then it just becomes a jungle. This is a grape plant that has been properly pruned. Here is the main trunk, and we have those 4 branches going off in each direction, 2 at the top, one coming out here, one coming out over here, one coming out down here. But as you notice, on this side, we don't have a cane coming out. We can do one of 2 things. We can allow the cane that's coming from the other plant to just go a little bit further to fill in this space, or if we can find 2 canes, for example, there's one over here on the back side, we can simply bend around and tie it to the trellis so that it will go in that same direction. Grape canes are very flexible, and they can easily be bent around and moved in whatever direction you need to move them. You may find a grape plant that hasn't been properly pruned, in which case you can correct it in a single season. For example, this is a cane that was allowed to remain from 2 years ago. It wasn't pruned off and should have been. In this case, we need to take the entire thing off, and so we can begin to remove these in sections. Real early on, as this vineyard was established, there was a plant that was planted here that died. So we don't have a plant here. We have one about 6 feet on this side and about 6 feet on that side. Rather than replace this plant, all we need to do is to allow those canes from that side to grow over a little bit further. Instead of cutting them out about 6 feet, we'll let them go to 10 to 12 feet. And as you can see from our cane that we pruned off, they'll easily grow 25 or 30 feet. So you'll have plenty of cane, and we don't have to worry about replacing this plant. There'll still be plenty of foliage in here to produce grapes, even though the plant is missing. If you read some of the manuals about pruning grapes, they talk about allowing about 50 buds or so to remain on the plant. And these buds are spaced about 6 inches apart. So when we talk about leaving that 6-foot length, means we're going to have then about 12 buds along that cane. And here's a bud that's forming right here, and this will actually produce grapes this season, as well as this one, as well as this one, as well as this one. So there'll be a cluster of grapes about every 6 inches along this cane. One at the top and one in the middle. New canes will form back off the trunk, may tend to form on a branch on an existing cane. And then next year what we're going to do is to pick out one of those good, strong, healthy canes as close to the trunk as we can find, and then take off the one that grew this past year. So this will produce 1 year, and then it'll be removed. Don't worry if you happen to break off a bud. There are several buds in the grape cluster, I guess you could say. And so if this happens to get broken off and or frozen off, there'll be another bud that will move in and take its place, usually up to about 3 buds.
For more information, visit your local extension office or visit our website at kansasgreenyards.org.